I feel what is personal is also universal. So when you go through certain things, it changes your perspective. And you have two choices, either to sit and let that happen or stand up and do something about it. I decide to stand up and I decide to talk about these issues. My current exhibit at Bellevue Arts Museum, Searching for Home, started in my mind many years ago. I grew up hearing about stories of migration. My parents moved from India to Pakistan, so I saw a lot of refugees and what they were going through. And I moved to US about 10 years ago, although it was out of choice, but there were many things that I could relate to. Like when I moved here, after a few years, I started feeling like this was my home. But every time I went back to Pakistan to visit my family, people here would say, "Oh, you are going back home." So for them, my home was always where I was born, in Pakistan. And this started a dialogue in my mind. Where is home? The idea of home. That kind of triggers this concept, which came together in the form of this exhibition. Growing up in Pakistan, I was lucky. I grew up in a family which was comparatively more open-minded, but still I felt there were a lot of issues which were part of the society. Everything that women wanted to do, often they had to get permission from the male member of the house. So in Pakistan, when kids are good in studies, they are expected to be either doctors or engineers. My family wanted me to become a doctor, and this was not something which came out of my heart. And art was something in which I did not have any boundaries. That was something I wanted to pursue. Initially, my family did not support me. They were against me taking it as a profession. So I went to art school. I got admission in a very prestigious college, and I got scholarship all 4 years. I ended up graduating with honors. And then the time came when pretty quickly my family came around. I particularly remember one day my father said in front of the whole family that he is very proud of me, and it was the right decision. It's one of the best moments in my life. My process involves most of the time thinking about an idea when I have a concept. I call myself conceptual artist, so I work around the ideas and concepts that I have. Once I have an idea, if my reference that I need is an everyday object, I go find that object. I go to secondhand shops a lot. When I see a form or an object that I feel will complement my idea, I will buy it. Secondhand shops are a perfect place to look for different variety and unique shapes. Some of the shoes in the installation at Bellevue Arts Museum I picked here. I look for these designs and textures. A lot of my work is about everyday and common objects. I want to use a form which is used. When I bring it to my studio, I often stage it. I start thinking about an appropriate medium, appropriate wood, and the technique, how am I going to do it? And then I start working on it. I felt wood was a medium which was clearly male-dominated medium. There was a lack of woman's voice in it. And I wanted to bring women's voice in that medium. So I moved to US about 10 years ago, and then I went through multiple miscarriages. And when I was going through miscarriages, I did not know what to do about it, because whenever I tried to talk to someone or even my friends, they were closed about it. They did not want to share it openly. I felt the need to bring it through my work. And I did a whole series, my Red Show. There were women who came to the show and started crying. They became very emotional. When even I feel that if I'm able to encourage someone to open up, realize that as an issue, or even just start a discussion, I'm successful. And that's exactly what I want to do with my life. This is my goal, this is my passion, and this is what I want to do. I think all the challenges that I have faced in my life have made me a better person. And if I get a choice to go back in time and do it all over again, I will do it all over again the same way.
we didn't plan that. Thank you all for coming today. It's great to be here with you, and thank you to both of you so much for coming to PAFA for this conversation. I have to say that I had the chance to see the show last night, as you know, and it's really, really extraordinary. If you haven't been yet, go. I don't know if there'll be time. What time do you close this evening? 6. Oh, there's time. So go immediately after this talk and oh, perfect. It's timed that way. Because I've had the benefit of enjoying the book, of which I recommend you all get. It's right here and right there, which is incredibly beautiful. But seeing the show in the flesh, or in the wood, I guess, was a whole nother experience. And I have to say that I was introduced to Humaira's work through Aisha Khan, who I think is in the audience somewhere, who, if you don't know 12 Gates on 2nd Street, she shows really brilliant artists and is always introducing me to new artists that I'm happy to learn about. And I remember very specifically walking in one evening, feeling rushed, and experiencing some of the work I think was from the Red Show, actually. In the 12 Gates exhibition. The floor piece, yeah. So there were a few pieces, and then I was immediately drawn to the 3 that you see behind me on the screen, which are called, there's Tempting Eyes 1, 2, and 3. And we were fortunate enough to acquire it for PAFA's collection soon after in 2018. And I have to say that there's a few different ways that bringing your work into the collection broke ground for us. I think that you may be, I was looking at this, the first Pakistani-American artist ever collected by PAFA, which is shame on us. But I'm so pleased that you are the first, because it's important. But also something that I think talks a little bit about our partnership here today is the breaking down that we've been trying to do, and I think you as well, between that really non-existent boundary between craft and art, and the relationship that Humaira's work has with that. And so that's something that's been quite exciting for me. And Tempting Eyes, and please say whatever you'd like about it. But part of what was interesting is that, one, it's about a proposed law, or a law that was talked about not allowing women to wear makeup that made their eyes look too tempting. So this was something that was being talked about at the time.
So this is actually a law. It's called Tempting Eyes Law in Saudi Arabia by religious police, that because eyes are the only part that women get to show. Almost all of the time they are covered. So they make very pretty eyes. So a few years back, they said if you make your eyes really pretty, it's tempting and you can be charged for that. You can read about that online. So yes, so one of the inspiration for this piece is from that law. Another one, of course, that women couldn't drive for so many years. Last year, they allowed them to drive.
Yes, and we actually have I stalked you on Instagram, and I asked if you would send us this video for our archive as well as to show today. So David, do you mind playing the video?
"2018, driving in Makkah. This is the very first year women got permission to drive in Saudi Arabia. सऊदी अरेबिया में मक्का मुकरमा में ड्राइव करें, पहला साल है जब औरतों को इजाज़त मिली है ड्राइव करने की। I'm sharing this experience, driving in Makkah. I wanted to be part of it.
And actually, it was that moment at the end when you look back at the audience in the rearview mirror, where this video to me felt like was a full circle moment for this piece, and maybe a transition into the new mirror pieces that you're showing in the exhibition at the center.
Yes, I mean, that's how the series started, inspired by these two laws and how crazy they are, and the limitations and restrictions imposed mainly on women. In the new all the show, the idea is same, looking back, looking in the mirror, but yes, what you are leaving behind and the kind of experience you have just had, and you are going away from it, but it has a great impact on you.
And could you describe a few of the images that are in the mirrors in that show, just so people could?
Most of them, there are 5 rear view mirrors, and 4 of them are inspired by the references from actual photographs from Rohingya Muslims in Burma. What happened to them, their houses were burned, a lot of people were killed, women were raped, and they had to leave and run away. So some of them show what happened to them, some of them show that they're leaving and running away from home. So it's about the current issues, which is what's happening in the world, and there is one which is about the situation of Gaza. So these are the situations which are very current, they are not being resolved. So my intention was to continue the conversation, keep it relevant, and also bring issues which are current into the conversation.
And how did the show come about between you two?
I was appointed curator of craft and design at the Bellevue Arts Museum in 2014. And at that time, the preparations were underway for that iteration of the museum's ongoing biennial series, which was focused each year on a different material. So that year happened to be wood. And of course, Humaira's work had been juried into the show, and so we were in the process of meeting all the artists and getting familiar with their works. Through the course of doing that, and after the show had already been up and discussed, we started to talk about the possibility of doing a solo exhibition of her work. And the image of the work that was in that show is not in these images here, but it stood out among 50 artists who were included in that show, which is, I should say, it was a regional exhibition of artists from 5 states in the northwest of the US, plus 3 Canadian provinces in the southwest of Canada. Humaira's work really stood out because it was raising a conversation, and there was such a distinct message there about womanhood, about motherhood, about challenging the societal role that women are meant to play, and asserting individuality as an artist must do. And that all of those stories were enfolded in this piece, which, in addition to asserting all of those messages, also was an incredible piece of craftsmanship. And that was really what I was looking for at that time as a curator in that role. And we had the ability to sort of foster those kinds of conversations at the museum within the framework of the very liberal mission that we had. So it was a natural, I think any curator in my position would say, we have to do something with this, and we have to work with this artist, because there's so much richness and layered material to that clearly can comprise an entire show. So in the course of 3 years, we organized Searching for Home, which opened in September of 2017, and it enjoyed a 6-month run. It was a really powerful experience putting it all together. The works that you'll see here and the images show not only the works in the show, but also the process behind some of those works, and the sort of source images that led to them. And we'll probably talk about a little bit about that in a few minutes. During the course of the exhibition, the response to it was so powerful that Humaira and I began to talk about the next stage for that show. In the meantime, I was appointed artistic director for the Center of Art in Wood, which was completely serendipitous, if you think about it, because when we organized the show, I had no idea that I would be in Philadelphia, and I had no idea, not even an inkling of a thought, that I would be advocating for the material of wood and creative engagement in it. So everything just worked out as if it had been planned, but it was out of my hands, and here we are. And I am really proud to say, and also in the course of all of that transpiring, we also did a book. Which is actually documentation of 3 projects. It's a documentation of this exhibition, it's a documentation of an exhibition that happened in parallel at 12 Gates Arts, and also your gallery at the time in Seattle, Art Exchange. So it was really a tripartite effort, and we were all very proud of it. But here we are today. We just opened Searching for Home Venue 2 at the Center for Art in Wood, and Humaira, in the meantime, added 3 groupings of sculptural works that really add to the conversation and bring another level of depth to it. And to connect to Tempting Eyes in that series, so Fragments of Home Left Behind Part 2 is a series of rear view mirror works that, as Humaira mentioned, focus on contemporary issues and sites of inhumanity, and we're forced to confront those. And I think what they do in the exhibition is bring a kind of contemporary urgency to the entirety of the show, which in many ways is universal in its scope and timeless in many ways as well, because we are reminded of many different points in time in histories around the world where these continue to be, these kinds of acts of inhumanity continue to be an issue. But to focus in such a meticulous way on acts that are happening now, whether it's in Gaza City or in Myanmar, Burma, they really kind of pull us back into the present and add that level of need for action to the entire discussion that takes place in the show. So this is, I mean, to bring back to the metaphor of rear view mirrors, these are things that we like to conveniently think of transpiring in the past, but they're happening right now.
And what is that process for you researching these materials, or as we think about the glut of images of these things around, to absorb that and then make work about it? If you could talk a little bit about that process.
I do a lot of research. I read about them, and whenever I see powerful photographs, I follow some photographers who go to these situations, and I keep saving them. So I have hundreds and hundreds of photographs. Then my next process is to shortlist them, and then I print them. I put them around me in my studio, and I keep looking at them for days and days. And then I select the one which speaks to me the most. And that's how I end up selecting the ones that I feel I want to use. And then these are, although have a direct reference to them, but the composition, some of them are then adjusted according to the size and scale of the work. So sometimes I add my own symbolism into it as well, if they are speaking to me. In some of the portraits, I've added like a dandelion plant because it says so much about the strength of the girl, who is fragile but strong too. So yes, there are some symbols that I do add to make the work more powerful and how it speaks to me as an artist.
And you spend a great deal of time then with the images, which is a really, to me, very powerful thought, that not only are you carving the forms, which takes a lot of time, but the painting and the focus that you must have to look at back and forth with the images.
Yeah, so sometimes my process takes months. And even just the same painting over weeks. I was just saying this to Jennifer the other day, that sometimes I am just sad. Without any reason, I'm sad. And I don't even know why I'm sad, because I'm looking at all the photographs for such a long time. I'm working on it. I'm painting each and every detail dot by dot, that I have a personal connection with them then. Often I even dream about them. They come in my dream. I'm having a communication. It feels like they become part of me. Wow. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I will say creating this body of work has not been easy. The issues I'm passionate about and I portray through my work is not easy, but they are important. I understand that it is important that I get the strength to do it.
I mean, especially at this moment. You said the show opened in September of 2017? Yeah. And when you think about what's happened from September of 2017 to now, I mean, what does that mean to be exhibiting this work in this time and making this work in this time? I mean...
All I can say is it continues to be more and more relevant and urgent, and unfortunately more than we had ever could have expected, and that's devastating to think about.
Yeah, I mean, when we were discussing this show, our hope was that the situation will improve. we didn't expect that it will actually get worse.
Sure.
And
How could it have gotten worse?
I mean, yes, in a way, but it keeps on expanding to other parts of the world. And it is just, it is very difficult. But other than that, I feel as an artist, it's my responsibility to talk about these issues and educate society, because a lot of people do not even understand that these things are really, really happening. These are actual events. So that's why I added more works, because from 2017 up till now, there is the situation has spread to other parts of the world, and those issues need to be talked about as well.
I think what's one of the things that's unique about Humaira's work is that, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, about the ease with which it could cross into didacticism or agitprop, and I think that her craft in two mediums is really what pulls us back, and as a maker on her side and as an artist, but also as viewers, we're compelled to participate in this discussion and in this message through the beauty of the technique and the beauty of the materials and the respect for those materials, and the use of beauty as a subversive tool to convey a message. Aisha and I had several conversations as well about the difficulty with which and the challenge of confronting this work and the discussions that are raised, and but the importance that art serves in order to build bridges between our reluctance to participate in these discussions and confront what is actually happening around us, and the works themselves, which I think they're very, very smart, because they are gorgeous to look at, and they are tactile, and they speak in a material that is familiar to all of us. It's a sensual material. It comes with its own series of metaphors, and that is a very smart use of a living material that has warmth and breadth.
They're disarming. I found we had that reaction a lot. People, number one, we were just talking about this, didn't think it was wood. And then they thought they were photographs. So that sets you off balance for this message to slip in.
I last week, in the process of organizing or sort of handling the installation, one of the most challenging installations in the show is the barbed wire, which is actually carved mahogany. It has the look, even from close up, of rusted wire. And I posted it on Instagram, and I asked the woodworkers in my little Instagram community, what's the material? And the woodworkers, it's a close-up. The woodworkers are saying vines, leather. They had no idea. So it remains a kind of, there is a sense of wonder that comes from such a deeply skillful use of a material and a manipulation of it that people can't help but be compelled by their curiosity. And the fact that Humaira is using curiosity and compulsion that comes from seduction of the use of materials in order to get them into territories that they would otherwise be very uncomfortable in entering is one of the most courageous things that artists can do.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, these are the things which are important to me. It's a conscious decision. For me, execution and concept, both in balance, is what makes a work of art successful. And it is very important for me. And yes, it is my intention that through the beauty of the execution and medium, I can bring people closer and then open up all these difficult conversations. So I'm really happy that the medium of wood and miniature painting is doing that for me, because they bring people closer, because there is an element of surprise. Is it really wood? Is it really photograph or a painting? And then brings them closer. First they experience, the technique, and then they say, okay, what's the message behind it? And it's not just this, or they are this also. And then it open up all these layers. Like, a lot of people tell me that my work is beautiful but haunting at the same time. And that's exactly what I want. Beautiful but disturbing as well, uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. Well, and you said that you feel like it's your responsibility to tell these stories. And that's a conversation that we've been having institutionally a lot, is in a moment like this, do artists have this responsibility? Where does that come from? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that idea.
I actually think everyone should take part in the change we want to see in the world. It's everyone's responsibility. It's just that art is the language I know, and I'm using that to talk about these issues. But I think each and every person should take part in any medium that they are good at, or they feel comfortable to talk about these issues.
And are you finding that as well? I mean, because it's there's such an amazing tradition of that in craft as well.
Sometimes it's said very glibly, craft is care, but there's a lot of truth to that. And if you're thinking about what is required of an artist who is working in the miniature painting tradition, sometimes the brush is comprised of a single hair. So if you think about an artist committing themselves to translating in their eyes an image that that comes from the Rohingya village, of so much unimaginable destruction, and the commitment of an artist to say, well, I'm going to, because I want to bring this story into my work, I'm going to sit and confront this image dot by dot, which takes hours, weeks, days, a long time. And you mentioned that it comes back to you in your dreams. Mm-hmm. I think there is a certain sacrifice there that that people can grasp, but I think a craft-oriented artist can really understand. And I think that there is a power in that, and that's in many ways that's what gives the message that comes through in Humaira's work such power and strength, is because of the level of craftsmanship that is invested in each of those pieces.
So through that craft and care, there's an element of healing or working through something. That's
true. And you asked me earlier about the envelope series, the installation I've done with envelopes, and talking about healing through work. How I started this series, I found 2 letters by my brother. When I was a little girl, he was not well, and my father took him to England for treatment. And that's where he passed away. So before passing away, he wrote 2 letters to me. And they're just simple, on a small piece of paper, simple letters that I'm missing home. It's very cold here, and I want to come back home. And I did not know for all these years that I had those letters. And 2 years ago, actually when the show was up, during that time, and I was going through my old photographs, and they were tucked in between 2 photographs in an album. And it was a very emotional experience for me, because it was like a piece of him left for me that I could actually feel and touch, that he has touched as well. And I decided to translate that experience into my art. So I actually carved an envelope out of pine wood and paired his letter with the envelope. And when I posted the image, there were so many people, friends of people who follow me, started sending me images and started sharing their stories, that they have a letter from their father, they have a letter from their grandfather, as old as 1905, that they have been holding on to, and my image or my work reminded them of that letter that they had forgotten about. So after this overwhelming response, I decided to do a series. So for this series, I received many, many letters that people let me use it for my installation. So I carved many different envelopes, and I paired them with the letters which are written in many different languages.
So, I mean, can you tell us the time period that these letters span, the different geographic areas?
So the letters, the time period, the oldest one I have in the installation is from 1905 to a recent one as early as just few. It's rewritten for us because there is a girl who was adopted, and then her father was in Vietnam. So they connected through social media, found her biological parents just recently. Wow. And when the first time he wrote to her and she wrote back, it's that letter. But although it was through email, I requested if she can write on a piece of paper so I can include in the series. So I heard that it was a very emotional experience for her. She cried and it made her very emotional. But I think it is very important because it is connecting people. And it talks about being away from people that they haven't met, but they have the strong connection. So, I mean, in this world now, everybody is connecting through text and calls, and nobody is really writing letters. So this was also my intention. So actually in the show, we have an activity area where we have printed postcards, and we are inviting people to come and write something to someone they haven't connected in a while, and the center will post the postcards to their loved ones.
So another connection to the hand.
Exactly. And to be thinking about, I think when we send it, maybe I'm very conservative in this idea, but I think when we send a text, it's very easy for us to either speak it into the phone and send it out and then not think about it. But some sort of romantic side of me thinks that there is something deliberate and considered about handwriting something, a message to someone else, and then going through the laborious task of getting a stamp and addressing it and then putting it in handing it off to the post office. There is something about that process that maybe from our point of view in a digital age seems to parallel the things that we think about in terms of craft as steps taken to realize something. As Humaira mentioned, the many digital platforms are resulting in reunions between many estranged people, and that's a really kind of beautiful thing about that tool. But reorienting it into the handwritten word is also a kind of poignant expression in the show. And that was not a part of the original venue of Searching for Home. And when I guess it came up in our conversations a year ago that you started to do this, and immediately all she did was send me one image of a carved envelope, and I immediately said, yes, it has to be in, because I think there are some very readable and legible metaphors included in the exhibition. Every time you have an artist dealing with the refugee crisis, you have a suitcase, and there are very concrete reasons for that. But the communication between people who are separated for whatever reason, because of adoption, because of war, because of having to flee and escaping from natural disasters and those impacts, there is communication between people who are separated by circumstance. And giving expression to that in this exhibition seemed like an extremely important thing to do, especially considering the title of it, which is really about finding home wherever it's going to be.
And so much of the work is about those familial connections, and especially the mother and motherhood, which is one of the themes that really drew me to your work. It's very powerful, and your use of blood. I'm wondering if you could talk. The blood and the ants are something that comes up a lot with your work, and I find it both very powerful. It sounds but I wonder if you could talk about those two, the way you use those in
the first
ways.
thing is confronting my own fear. So because I cannot see blood, I actually pass out if I see blood. So the one was not just to confront my own fear, but also bring it into my work, because I'm talking about loss and death, but as well as the color red. Color red has different meaning in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. Like in Pakistan, it's the color of wedding dress. So, but in Africa and some other countries, it's the color of death. So, I mean, there are different associations, and then it's a color for Valentine's Day, celebrating love. So there are different links and different meanings behind the color, and something that I'm interested in, duality of meanings, layers of meaning behind things. Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons I use that, and I first started using when I did a whole series about miscarriages. I've had multiple miscarriages, and I did a whole series on it. And for ants, actually the first time I used ants was when I showed my installation when we first met at Bellevue Arts Museum, and it's a self-portrait. And in the self-portrait, there are two portraits of myself, in which I have covered my head, and the other portrait is I'm standing in front of it, and I'm holding a cigarette and wearing sleeveless. Because when I went to art school, my brother came and gave me a warning that because it's considered a place where you get too much freedom. So he said, girls smoke there and they wear sleeveless, so I'm giving you warning. So I ended up painting myself, holding a cigarette. And
Manifestation of your brother's fears.
so in that installation, I had, and my portrait is surrounded by 4 carved handguns out of Wengi wood. And the ants crawl from portrait up to the tricycle that I had made out of wood. And the ants in this show also, not just because they are known for migrating in groups, which is relevant to the theme, they are known for their hardworking nature, mostly female ants. And also, I grew up seeing ants around us whenever we left something, so it represents kind of their presence at dead and decaying. And then my main point is that a lot of time people come and ask me why there is an ant, and it starts a conversation. So as starting a conversation within my audience, and when they come up and they ask this question between us. So it's very important for me that I start a conversation, and they often do that. Make people think, and they make them come up to me or someone who's there and say, why there are ants? And it starts a conversation.
On a personal level, in fact, my entry into the world of contemporary craft started with studying, I'm actually, by education, I studied design history and focusing on contemporary design. And the time of my graduate school education, there was a kind of movement in Europe taking place where the work of designers was being considered in museums and galleries, which is quite antithetical to design if you think about what design is. And but for me, it was a very exciting time because I was really captivated by this idea of taking a familiar object, which comes with its own kind of built-in relationship between the object and the user, and then harnessing that power into something that is critical or speculative and forces us to think about who we are in a different way. So that kind of led me to craft. And so the ants, and subversion through power, these powerful relationships was really something that was galvanizing for me as a curator. And I would say that I haven't had a chance to work with these issues as much as I'd like to, but for me, I saw the ants in Humaira's work as a way of undercutting the beauty of the objects and forcing us to, it gives us a sense of unease. And the ants have their own kind of, they're a very fascinating creature actually. There are issues of labor and migration and movement, and the fact that there are female workers is another layer of meaning there. But they also have been used by surrealist artists as a way to inject unease into something. Dali and Louis Buñuel made the film Andalusian Dog, and ants were a big part of that, and played the part of creating a sense of a real disturbing kind of unease throughout the whole film. And so having them kind of make their way through many of Humaira's works is, I think, a way of forcing us to kind of be aware that the world of beauty can be very, very, very seductive, but it is never without its darker sides.
I will also point one thing that sometimes the connection that audience has with images, their own personal connection, adds to the work. So a couple of times it has happened that people came to me and said, and when I explained the idea behind the ant, and they say, when I look at some of your installations, which are about people who have left their home and what's left behind, and then there are ants, and it reminds them that life must go on.
Oh, that life must go on. Wow.
So, other than all the difficulty of it, what's left behind and all the objects, there is life, and the life must go on. So
that's interesting, because I was thinking about how much your work makes me think about people and the figure, but there's not a figure in sight, except maybe in the paintings.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting, the answer, for that person at least, life goes on.
Yes. And you asked me earlier about the process of healing. So I
yeah.
want to come back and touch that a little bit more. So I created the envelope to heal myself, thinking again about the death of my brother. But through a lot of this work, I think my aim is that it also heals people who are disturbed by displacement. So a couple of times it happens that people come to the show and they see it. And just yesterday there was a girl, and her parents were refugees, and she saw that and she got very emotional. And in the end, and then she said, "Your work make me reconnect with my parents. I feel that I have not been connected with them." So I mean, this is exactly what my hope is: to heal. Write a letter if you haven't been in touch with someone, connect with people, or think about people who are being displaced, or maybe they are trying to make their home again, and have more compassion for them.
Imagine ourselves in those places with those objects in a way. Well, lovely. Well, we have some time for questions. If anyone has any questions for, yes.
I just saw it today, so I was very struck with the contrast between the red, which obviously represents blood, and the color of the wood. And you were pretty much exclusively using red as the color contrast with the wood. And that turned my quick. That piece there, I wondered why you did that, because it is so colorful and in such stark contrast to the rest of the exhibit. Why did you choose to do that?
Did everyone hear that before?
I think you should repeat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a swing and has a very colorful seat.
She was saying that she was really struck by the contrast between the red in the exhibition and the color of the wood, and then was wondering about the swing piece and how the painting for that came about.
So one of my intentions were when I decided to work in wood, which is to bring a woman's point of view, and also my intention was to give respect to the medium. So initially I decided I will not really cover the material with anything and have the actual material speak for itself. But I started using red initially for that series red, and also to represent loss. But it is actually wood stain, so it actually absorbs into the wood. So if you come very close, you can see the grains through it. So red, yes, because red is a very interesting color. It's striking, it brings you closer. And then because of the duality of meaning that it has, affiliation with celebration as well as death. And about the swing, actually, my training is in both mediums. My main mediums are miniature painting and sculpture, mostly in wood. So I have been passionate about both mediums for a long time. And then after a few years, I thought I was doing them separately in the early years of my career. And I decided, how can I blend them together and maybe do an installation-based work? This is one of the good examples where I have done that. And Colorful Cactus Garden, because the title of the work is "The World is Beautiful and Dangerous Too." So I created this work after a few years ago. There was an attack on a school in Pakistan by militants, Taliban, and they killed over 140 kids in army school to hurt the army, because there was a war going on between Taliban and army. And in some of the attacks from army to Taliban area, some of their kids got killed. So it was kind of a revenge to Pakistan army. So it was such a painful experience for me. It's one of the incidents which affected me very deeply. So they mostly killed boys. There was only one girl killed who was 5 years old, and it was her first day in school. And all I saw was photographs of her shoes. And my daughter was same age at that time, 5-year-old, and she had almost same shoes. So I decided to carve her shoes, use that as a reference, and I actually painted my own daughter in that cactus garden. So from a distance, you see there is a girl on a swing in a very pretty, lush garden, but if you come close, it's a cactus garden, which has thorns. So it's just what I feel for this world, that the world is beautiful, but it's dangerous too. no matter how much security and protection you try to give to your kids, it's not as safe as we think. I mean, anything can happen anywhere. It could have been my daughter. And it's not just happening in Pakistan, but other parts of the world, including US. You know about shootings in schools in US also. So anything can happen to our child anywhere, and it could have been my daughter. So that actually, that was the reason I made that piece. And that's why the garden is lush and it looks beautiful from a distance. But when you come close, it's actually a cactus garden.
Any other questions?
The rear view mirror in the current exhibit, which we just saw an hour ago. Tell me what your impression, meaning is to that. I mean, I have my meaning, but I'd like to know what yours is.
She's, sorry, just so I can repeat the question. She's wanting to know the meaning of the rear view mirrors in the exhibition at the center.
So for this exhibition, the pieces I have created, my main symbol, because I use everyday objects as symbols. And I use the rear view mirror as if giving you a view that you are leaving behind, going away from home in search for a new home. But that's what has happened to them, which made them move. So that's why there are scenes of what happened to Rohingya Muslims, most of them, which made them leave their homes and in search of or on a run to find a new home.
That's what I took away.
I'm glad to know that.
Sure, please.
I've often wondered about this, and maybe you could help me. I've often thought that craft, particularly wood, because it is so tactile and it takes so long, obviously the process takes forever, is a very different experience for the artist, or I feel like it must be a very different experience for the artist than painting, and almost more immediate than painting. Do you feel that way? I mean, is there, since you do both, doing the woodcraft, is that more upsetting than doing painting that represents the same thoughts and feelings?
So she's asking if there's a different feeling or the way you feel when you work with wood versus how you work with painting.
For me, there is no difference. I almost spend so much time on both mediums. Miniature painting take as long, although even so small, sometimes take as long as a big installation. So for me, there is no difference. I'm spending a lot of time on both mediums. I'm saying similar things through my mediums. For me, as an experience, there is no difference. But yes, there are different challenges of both mediums. And then to blend them together has different kind of challenge as well. So, I mean, initially when I started blending them, a lot of people thought I was crazy. That, I mean, because they're so different, 3D, 2D, even the perspective and everything is very, very different. The basic rules for miniature painting and sculpture are completely opposite. But actually it has worked in my favor because my miniature painting technique helped me look at the details to that much detail even for my sculptures. And I got my patience and spending so much time on each piece from miniature painting technique. So for me, they have worked in my benefit. So yes, for me, each work is a different challenge in a different way, which I actually love. If the work is not challenging for me, it's not, I don't feel excited about it if it doesn't challenge me. So I love challenges. So yes, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. By the way, you meet your challenge very well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, someone was asking me the other day that, is this piece carved out of a single piece of wood and how many pieces are there? And I was explaining it to them that which one is single piece and which ones are not. And then I explained it to them that in the beginning of my career, creating a form out of a single piece of wood was a challenge. And I've done that, but now it's not a challenge for me anymore. So if it's not a challenge for me anymore, I don't care about it as much anymore.
Oh, yes, please.
First of all, thank you, Humaira, for sharing your experience and you have a lot of courage in your work and lots of the way of telling stories and the way of dealing with issues. I'm wondering if there is, first of all, if there is any issue that you don't want to touch or you're afraid of touching or something like that, or if some other people told you to not touch that, or don't get close to it because it's dangerous to deal with.
He's wondering if there's a subject that you do not want to go into or touch in your work, or if someone has told you not to.
It's actually opposite. If somebody tells me not to touch any subject, I will make sure I go there. I mean, you can see I went to Saudi Arabia and I drove a car and my husband was all the time panicking. And so no, I don't feel that way. There is nothing that scares me. I mean, my sister, one of my sisters, she lives in Dubai. And when I created Tempting Eyes, she freaked out. And she started sending me messages. Are you crazy? You don't know them? They can hurt you wherever you are. You are opening up these discussions. And I said, I don't care. I really don't. I believe I'm crazy. But change comes from crazy.
Any other questions? That does seem like a good note to end. Change comes from crazy? I feel like there's a t-shirt in there, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And also, thank you for realizing the potential and the strength of Humaira's work and bringing it into the collection. That is an institutional statement that is so powerful, and it reads into the legacy of the institution. And I think that's an amazing step forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jodi?
Yes.
Could you just let everyone know about the show featuring an artist who works in wood
Yes, there is
before they go over to the Center for the Art and Wood?
art and wood.
Yeah, they might want to.
It's true. We actually have a fair amount of wood things.
He was also a painter and
Yeah, there's an exhibition of Wharton Eschrich's on the second floor. If you go up 2 levels here, you can take the elevator up to 2. That was curated by John Grieg, a professor in our sculpture department, actually. And then Helen Frankenthaler's, frankly, the woodblock prints that maybe you all walked through are also a nice connection, I think. Yes, thank you.